Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's CEU webinar, Principles of Project Intelligence. We are going to go ahead and get started. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We will have everyone on mute, and we'll be taking questions at the end of the session today. So if you have questions as we're going along, just write it down and type it into the chat area, and we will make sure to get it answered for you. One other housekeeping item, we want to also make sure that you guys can hear us okay. So if you wouldn't mind just typing in the chat if you can hear me okay, just to indicate if the sound is good as we get started here. So a little bit of introduction about myself. My name is Paul Benyon. I'm in my 9th year here at Hard Dollar Corporation, currently the director of our training and development department. So I'm responsible for training all our new employees. Also, I've successfully conducted training programs for a lot of the large international companies that we work with. And so we'll go ahead and get started. So today's session is Principles of Project Intelligence. And to get started, a little bit of background about Hard Dollar in case you aren't familiar with our background and who we are, what we do. Hard Dollar, we are really the industry leader in project cost management. So when we say project cost management, we're really talking about getting all of your project information revolving around cost and productivity into a single place where all of the systems that influence and affect your costs, all that information can be gathered together. So that involves cost estimating, progress measurement, and also the ability to integrate with other systems such as pulling in takeoffs, connecting with scheduling, and with your ERP system. And by getting all of that information and harnessing it into one place, we're able to then allow you to be able to answer the question, how did we come up with that number? And you can have the confidence that you have the cost control and the profitability that you need. So that's just a little bit of background about Hard Dollar. The remainder of our lesson time will be focused on project intelligence. So let's jump right in. Now you may have heard of the term project intelligence, business intelligence, or big data. Talking about big data, that's a term that gets thrown around a lot in a lot of different industries. Think of big data as it's just a way of saying there's a massive volume of data. That could be structured data, unstructured data, and it's so much, it's so large that it's really becoming difficult to process that information using a traditional relational database or traditional software that you have. So think of some of the softwares that you have, maybe your accounting system, your estimating system, your scheduling tool. Those use traditional databases, but when you start to deal with all of the data, think of all of the data in all of your projects, and what if you wanted to be able to compare all that information and look at a lot of that information at once and kind of crunch the numbers? You're going to run into some challenges. First of all, it'll just take forever to try to, when you want to search for something. So the challenges include capturing the data, storing the data, searching through the data, sharing it, transferring it, analyzing it, and being able to visualize it. So part of part of what's causing this influx of all this data is there's also a trend to building larger data sets due to the additional information that you're deriving from analyzing more than just one set of data. So for example, along with your typical project estimate, you might also want to take a look at other business trends or traffic conditions or weather patterns, things like that, all things that are conditions that could affect your project. And also just think of the size of your projects. Let's take a project, maybe it spans a couple of years and has about 100 account codes associated with it. When that budget is broken into all the tasks involved, the subtasks, and all the resources calculated, easily you're going to end up with thousands, tens of thousands of data points. And that's just one project. So think about how many projects you have going at once that maybe once you're hitting the progress measurement side of things, you have timesheets and you have multiple activities per timesheet per day, easily contributing hundreds of thousands of rows of data. So this all builds up, and you end up swimming in this information. I'm sure some of you out there are experiencing this, where you're trying to get your arms around this data. So business intelligence is the software and the databases used to capture, retrieve, and analyze all of this big data. So that's not just a construction industry term by any means. Business intelligence is used all over the place. Project intelligence is kind of a newer area, and that is referring to more specific to project management and the big data associated with that. So think of project intelligence as a narrower focus, where we're looking at the world of project management and capturing and retrieving and analyzing all of the information for your projects. So big data, we see it all over the place. Grocery stores use big data for product placement. So think logically about your grocery store and think about where all the cold items are. You have maybe the milk in one part of the store, but then you have like the meat in another part, the freezer section somewhere else. It doesn't really make sense from a utility standpoint, right? Well, there's a reason for that. Notice that when you go back to the milk, it's always at the back of the store, and you usually have to walk through the liquor aisle to get to it. There's a reason for that. And that's all based on the grocery industry has really grabbed onto big data and calculating, looking at demographics, shopping trends, buying patterns, and find, for example, that young fathers, when they go to, on their way home from work, their wife might ask them to pick up diapers for their little baby on the way home from work. Well, they found that also the father likes to pick up a six-pack of beer. So they know they can make more money if they have the beer right next to the diapers. So none of that's happening on accident. That's all being driven by effective analysis of this data, business intelligence. Another example is New York City. They use big data to predict when crime will appear in the city. When are there peak patterns of crime? And so they use computer software to collect and analyze just a wealth of different data sets, including traffic patterns, data from outside webcams, so they can see like how many people are walking by, weather patterns. And by pulling all of this information together, they're able to find trends where crime would spike. So maybe when it's not raining outside and there's a certain amount of traffic, etc. So from this information, they're able to plan ahead and say, hey, we predict that based on past trends, this is going to be a high crime time or time of day or area, and they can proactively put police in place where those certain conditions are predicted. So project intelligence, like I mentioned, it's doing the same thing that we see in those other industries, but now we're focusing on our projects or our portfolio of projects, and we're trying to play the game a lot smarter so that we can, the bottom line is our bottom line. We want to cut down our costs. We want to try to foresee where there's risk. We want to be more efficient. We want to be more proactive with our decision making so we can really maximize our profit. And that's really what project intelligence gets us to. But there's some challenges in implementing a project intelligence solution. There's some technology behind it and just some hurdles that have to be surmounted. And so we're going to take a look at a few of those that you really want to have at the forefront of your mind as you're starting to make a decision to do this. The first issue is just the complexity of a large construction company. By nature, as a company grows, it gets more and more processes and systems in place to manage that project. The projects themselves become more complex. There's multiple disciplines and multiple departments involved. And you can think of each of those as branches of a tree. And the branches become branches of branches. And it starts to be hard to collaborate, communicate, share the information back and forth, and capture everything. So we can think of the project itself, that all of these systems and such are branching from, is the trunk. So we're trying to collect all this information, capture it, get it in one place, and then be able to synthesize it so we can analyze it properly. So obviously there needs to be considerations to what is the standard. What are we going to standardize on? How are we going to get everything in the same format? We recently worked with a client that recognized that there's high costs due to the inability of being able to process this data. So this client was experiencing amazing growth. They're part of an economy, it's in another, not North America over the last few years, but they were in an economy that was rapidly growing. And over the past 4 years, they actually increased their revenue by 74%. And so year after year, they were just booming. But they found that even though they increased their revenue by 74%, their profit margins had gone down by 8%. So increasing revenue dramatically and making less profit. So they looked at all of their processes and systems, and they realized that there was a lot of inefficiency going on because they had added so much and grown so quickly that they weren't doing things as efficiently as they could, and they recognized that. So they looked at how can they collect all this information and process it and get the information they need out of it. And so they chalked it up to inefficiencies of their cost management systems. One example of this is the generation of reports. So why do we have reports? We have reports to see the status, to kind of get information in our hands so that we can make decisions off of it and catch where things are going off course, steer things in the right direction. Well, we've worked with and consulted with a large mining contractor looking at project intelligence, and they said that they spent 6 hours a week putting together a weekly report and 2 days each month putting together monthly reports. So by the time the reports were put together, a lot of times it was already past information. It had become inaccurate. And often there was a lot of confusion around who had the most recent correct version of the report. Just imagine a room full of maybe a dozen people and you got a lot of spreadsheets where you're trying to have the most recent version of this, right? Well, think about how much time they spent preparing those reports and then how much time was left for them to be able to analyze those reports. If we had, say, 100% of their time and maybe as much as 50 or 60% of their time was spent just getting all of the data put together. So that's robbing them of valuable time that they could be making good decisions on what to do with this project that they weren't able to do. The last challenge that I wanted to cover was cost and expertise. Have you ever tried fixing an old radio or an old device? Well, a few years ago I was working on, our DVD player broke, right? And it wasn't like it was super expensive or anything, but I was determined this 5-disc DVD player, I was going to fix it. I got in there, took a stab at it, got the shell off, and quickly realized that it was beyond my abilities. So as soon as I saw a microchip in there, I knew I was done. I came to the realization that it would cost more to get it fixed than buying a new one, so you can guess what I ended up doing. But setting up an environment that can support project intelligence can come at a really high cost. And it's because you're dealing with so much information, you have to install a whole new set of software. And the other challenge is each enterprise runs their business and their project management differently. So they're going to have their own set of metrics and KPIs, and so the reporting needs will be custom. And so you buy the solution, and that's just the beginning. You're then going to have a team of IT staff that have reporting expertise, that know how to use these databases to be able to tweak and build reports that are exactly the way you want them to be. The other issue is the traditional relational database will be insufficient for the large quantities of information that need to be processed. Think of when you do a search on Google. They're not using traditional databases. It would take maybe an hour for you to get back a query that you put into Google. Instead, they use a different schema, like a 5-star schema they call it. It's required for being able to do quick drill-ins to get information fast. And that's definitely a key need for whatever project intelligence tool you use, it needs to have that kind of technology behind it that allows you to be able to do those quick queries. The last issue is a lot of times you'll buy into the business intelligence tool and you get in there, you're maybe ready to start building some reports, but the database has no structure set up in it yet. And so again, you're relying and leaning on IT and business analysts to build out the database model. So for example, if you were wanting to do a report that compared your planned costs to the progress you're making on that project, so your actual costs, well, what do they call them? Do they call them actuals, actual costs? Is that already set up in there, those buckets to put all the data into? And a lot of times in a lot of solutions it's not already created, and so you really want to be aware of that when you're going in and looking at solutions. Is there kind of an industry standard database already set up, or is that going to be part of the implementation costs? So that being covered, you may be feeling kind of wary of jumping in and putting this type of a solution in effect. So why would you want to do project intelligence? These are real challenges. What makes it worth all the effort and the cost? Well, in some ways, we really look at the way a lot of projects are going in the industry. You don't have to look too far to see that it may be too costly to not take steps in this direction. For example, according to a 2012 KPMG study, less than 24%, so less than a quarter of all the projects done in that year were coming in under budget. So that means 75% or more of the projects were over budget. So there's a lot of cost wasted that's costing contractors, and owners are eating up costs that they could be using for opportunities somewhere else. So this requires action, obviously, and the right direction to get a handle on your project costs. So if you can get control over your costs, increase your profits, you can win work more, you can earn more revenue. So let's take a look at how we can achieve those kind of benefits in project intelligence. There's some key kinds of metrics and benefits that come from a project intelligence solution. First of all, we have, if you think of the good old days, I remember on my wall, my mom used to have lots of antiques, and she had a washboard, an old washboard sitting on the wall, and I used to sit there and be amazed that someone actually used to do their laundry that way. And just think about that, compare that to your washing machine. I mean, I have a washing machine now that half my wardrobe can fit in the container. They're so big. And just think of the efficiency, the man hours cut down by that machine. Automation cuts man hours, it cuts costs, it also reduces things like human error when we're thinking of project management. It gives you more cost control. And over time, this can have a remarkable impact. Just all that time spent, for example, that mine company that was building those reports manually and taking days to put them together, if that could be automated so that that information flows in behind the scenes without anyone having to gather it manually, now all that time is freed up for them to be able to really do what their job is set out to do, to manage the project and make sure it's set on the right course. If you were asked to do a taste test of an ice cream cone, chocolate ice cream cone, your understanding of how good it would be is kind of subjective, right? You might think it's the greatest ice cream cone in the world until you try maybe a second one from somewhere else, and that one totally blows your mind, and then suddenly the first one doesn't seem as good. Well, really, one of the key things that project intelligence does is it gets you information about all of your projects so that you can benchmark your performance and do comparison and really know our labor costs, our labor productivity, equipment usage, material costs, all that information, we need benchmarks to compare it against, where we can look at projects that were similar in nature, take into consideration all of the kind of variables, but then have a good idea of if we're on track or not. So we can work a lot smarter with our projects. So if we think about the most important factors for a project, we've got our cost of materials and supplies, you have your labor costs, and you have cash flow. And if project intelligence is worthwhile, it's got to be effective in addressing each one of those factors. So here's an example. Perhaps, let's say procurement, your procurement department needs to buy 10,000 cubic yards of concrete for a current project. So a good project intelligence tool would allow them to pull up a report that compares the cost per cubic yard of concrete purchased recently for other projects in that region. So here, for example, you see on average other projects, $90 per cubic yard. Well, right now, as you're shopping around, you see the new project, you have $85 per cubic yard. So hey, right now might be a good time to buy. It's cheaper. Well, you already need to buy the 10,000 cubic yards of concrete. That's a no-brainer. But in addition, from your project intelligence tool, you're able to pull up a report that shows that there's 75,000 cubic yards of concrete that will soon be needed for other projects in the area. So with that information, you can actually buy those cubic yards of concrete in advance at the lower price, and so you're cutting costs even on projects in the near future. In another example, you may want to look at the portfolio level of all of the projects that you're performing so that you can see what your labor costs are project over project. You would maybe want to have insight into what labor rates are from region to region, or along with weather patterns or other conditional information that would be affecting your man hours. Well, trying to pull out the key information, we talked about that one of the challenges is capturing all this data, but once you have it all captured, it could be almost a little daunting unless you have good ways of pulling out what I call them the gold nuggets of information. Just like when you're sifting for gold or panning for gold, you have to shake it, shake it, shake it until all of the gold rises to the top, the gold nuggets. So that's the real valuable information. So what would be the gold nuggets that's getting lost in that minutia? That would be, for example, your key performance indicators. Maybe you want to measure man hours, equipment hours, and maybe your quantities completed as you're monitoring the performance of your project. So man hours, and quantities complete. So let's say you had 150 data points per month, and you go for 36 months for those 3 key indicators. So there you got, 5,400 data points, and those data points are constantly needing to be managed and updated. And every time activities are rescheduled or there's changes, they need to be updated to reflect the accurate stats in your daily reports. Well, the nice thing about project intelligence is that all that information could be automated and flowing in. And then, as it all gets gathered, there are ways to have the gold nuggets come to the surface. In other words, calling out the key activities that may be falling behind or are off track, not hitting their KPIs, just like the gold sifting to the top. One example of how a project intelligence tool can call out the gold nuggets of data is to use conditional formatting, as you can see in this example. So this report is providing information for a portfolio of various projects that we have underway. On the y-axis on the left, it indicates which country the project is in, and the x-axis is indicating which division the projects fall under. This graph is using green, yellow, and red formatting. That's the conditional formatting to indicate how much each project is costing at that point in time. So the coloring will change for each project depending on how much of that project's budget is spent. And it's a quick way. Picture speaks 1,000 words. It's calling out the information that would be of most concern to me. I see this energy project and this mining project are in the red. They're going. I'm eating up too much of the budget on those. So I'm going to hone in on those and check them out further. Traditional reporting models, they typically require the pulling of data to get what we need. So, for example, you have to go and run the report. You got to find the correct report and then print it out and analyze it. But the automation of the flow of data for project intelligence, it should be bidirectional, that flow. So that along with the pull, the capturing and consolidating of all your project data, it should also push your project data to those that need it. So for example, you might have a foreman out in the field that needs to get information to help guide him day to day as they're doing the work, or the project manager supervising the project, or the CFO who maybe wants the latest cash flow report. So through alerts and updates, there are ways that the project intelligence tool should send out the reports automatically. So that's taking it to the next level, pushing that information out so that they don't have to go searching for it to find it. Another key element that really is a benefit for project intelligence is the ability to do predictive analysis. Wouldn't it be nice if when planning your project you could just see the future and know exactly how things are going to go? Obviously, that's not possible. There's always going to be uncertainties. There's always going to be risks that can't be accounted for, but good project intelligence software will include the ability to do some predictive analysis to try to cut down the risk and help you to foresee as much as possible for how that project's going to go. So at the most basic level, you could take a typical rise over run graph and calculate the average of all the data points that you have and predict off of that. So for example, maybe your data points are the number of man hours it takes to perform a certain task. So you have maybe multiple different projects where you've done that task. You can see the man hours for each one of those projects that were used to do that task. And then you come up with an average, and it's able to indicate exactly and predict for you where you should end up. But a good predictive analysis tool can go much further than that. There are more sophisticated software options available that will run thousands of statistical combinations to predict plausible cost and schedule outcomes for your project. So, of course, project management is more subjective than just statistics, and when you consider you have to consider all the conditions involved when making your project decisions. But it can definitely rule out a lot of scenarios and be used to help you find the best direction to go for your project. So finally, let's talk about some of these best practices of how can we get a project intelligence solution set up. So, you know, with the very real challenges to project intelligence, what makes it worth the work? Well, you should first of all seek out a solution that has as much of the database set up and done as possible. So a lot, like we already talked about, a lot of the business intelligence tools require the design of the database structure as part of the implementation. You want to avoid as much of that as possible that you can by seeking out a solution that already has the structure defined. So for example, you'll want to measure earned value, let's say. You'll want to understand how the solution would measure earned value. What does it how do you want to term those items and create those buckets for actual cost, for planned budget, for your forecasting? You know, all of that may need to be built depending on the solution that you decide to go with. So you definitely want to make sure you look into that and understand what kind of database model do they have. And if you can't understand their terminology, or if it simply doesn't exist, then guess who is going to pay for having that created? So you'll want to ensure also that the solution will provide the security, the storage capacity, and the speed to be able to effectively capture and analyze your data. So you'll want to know how secure the solution can be, whatever project intelligence solution you look at. Is it run on-premise, or is it in the cloud? And if it's in the cloud, how secure can that information be? And when you think of the size of your projects, they can take up a lot of space. So say you have 1,000 activities and sub-activities, and just divide them up by year, quarter, month, week, day, And very quickly you can have hundreds of thousands of data points, and all that information has to be stored somewhere. And most solutions, they're going to charge you, or you pay for the solution based on storage capacity. So you really want to make sure you know up front, or have a good idea, and they'll help you calculate, how much storage capacity am I going to require, and how much is that going to cost. So do your homework. And the strength and success of a project intelligence solution, it really will revolve around how effective it is at providing the right information to the right people at the right time. That's really our goal, right? To be as efficient as we can, getting the information into the right hands so we can control our costs and we can be profitable. So it needs to be the information that is affecting the critical measurements of the job. It needs to be the key information for cost, man-hours, schedule, etc. And you're trying to get that information into the right hands as soon as possible so they can move forward and make proactive decisions to steer their project and portfolios to success. So to achieve that goal, whatever software solution you adopt, a primary goal for the system should be, along with the right database, should be the ability to create reports as quickly and easily as possible and send them out to the right people. And there's a long continuum or range there when you look at the different solutions that are out there. Some, you buy it and then you basically are paying implementation services forever for a big team of people to be your consultants to build all your reports and everything for you. And then it ranges all the way to the other end of the continuum where it can be more automated, where you're kind of given more frontline authority and able to build reports yourself, or maybe your team, your project team. That way they can have a user interface to be able to set them up themselves, and it can be much quicker that way. So you want to make sure you go in the right direction. So obviously this webinar is sponsored by Hard Dollar, and Hard Dollar as a project cost management tool, one of its main roles is to have a traditional database that stores all of your cost information. And once we have that gathered into Hard Dollar, our project intelligence solution that Hard Dollar has is called Lasso. And Lasso allows you to be able to take all that information that's been gathered up in your cost management tool, and then it can pull it up into a reporting tool. So that's where all of this crunching of the big data occurs. That's where your reporting and your dashboards will feed out of to all the key people that need it. So what we're going to do, we're actually going to jump in and show you a couple of examples in Lasso Project Intelligence to just kind of give you a feel, an example of our project intelligence tool and how it works. So if I jump over to Lasso, this is the Getting Started page when you first come into the Lasso solution. So you'll notice right off the bat that I'm in a web browser. So this is in the cloud. It is completely secured so that no one else can have access to your data. It's very secure, very locked down, and it is only accessible to those that you invite to join your account or your portfolio of projects. So if I just jump up to take a look at my dashboards, you can see right now under this portfolio, and the portfolio is just a grouping together of all of your projects, and I have various reports that I can run for that portfolio. So for example, maybe I just want to take a look at the breakdown of this portfolio, and this is going to give me some summary information about the portfolio as a whole and kind of how it breaks down. So you can see, for example, it tells me I have 3 divisions, and within those 3 divisions I can see how much cost I have accrued so far for each of those divisions. Down below I can compare my planned cost to my actual cost so far for each of the projects that are in my portfolio. Okay, so this is kind of the bird's eye view. This is the benefit of bringing all this data together. Now I can get analysis looking across all of my projects. I can also see how does it break down into different cost categories. We recently were working with a client that by having this kind of visibility into where all of their project costs end up being, like how much of their project actually is their own labor costs, they were making the assumption that they had high amounts of labor costs when they were finding that because of all the subcontractors they use, that really there was more of their costs being spent for subcontractors than their own labor costs. So they totally redirected their efforts to focus on their subcontractors and helping to make sure that they stay under cost and they get their work done on time, which they simply did not have that kind of visibility where they could catch that previously. Another example here, I'll just click on another dashboard. This is portfolio execution. We can see on this one as it comes up, there will be two sides to this chart. We have on the right, we have our typical S-curve. So we're taking a look, in this case, we happen to be looking at our entire portfolio right now. So it's all of our projects. And we can see how are we doing comparing our planned costs to the costs that we've earned, our actual costs, and then our forecast. You can see how it's playing out as we go along here. On the left-hand side, we see it represented as CPI versus percent complete. So as I move to the right, I'm getting more and more percent complete. The higher up it goes, the higher my CPI. Then I also have a third measurement here, which is the size of the project, which you can tell by the size of the circles. So the nice thing about this project intelligence tool is we really cut down significantly on the IT work. There's not a team of business analysts that have to be under the hood setting this all up. It is a much easier kind of user interface. We actually have it as part of the interface called Designer that you can click on, and I have a permissions issue right now that's not going to allow me to jump right in there at the moment. But in Designer, you're able to go in and you can actually build these reports on the fly. And we have a little slogan we use from our marketing department, drag, drop, done, that basically captures the essence of it, that it's very simple. With maybe just a little bit of practice, you are able to build out your own reports without having to rely or lean on support. We also have a structured database already built that reflects the terminology of our industry. So you have a leg up on that, where you don't have to kind of structure the database like we were talking about. Instead, you're able to jump right in. So let's take a look at one more example here. This one is reflecting some of the geo-mapping technology that happens to be part of our project intelligence. So this shows an example of, along with your basic project cost and hours information, we're also able to track and pull in other information. This is where you can get into other conditions like weather and such, and how that might affect your project. Here we see a map, and I'll just kind of give myself some more room here, that is showing me all of the projects that I have going on right now around the world, and the circles represents the size of the project, so I can see where my biggest projects are, and get an idea of how much of my resources are being eaten up by those at that time. I can, of course, zoom in on any one of those areas as needed as I want to focus in and see, for example, what projects do I have going on right now in North America, how much is their budgeted costs, and so forth. So just kind of food for thought, gives you a feel for the types of project intelligence tools are out there. Again, this one is called Lasso, and this information is being fed from Hard Dollar. But the idea is not to be specific to any one system when connecting all of your data up, to be able to pull that information from multiple sources. So that being said, let's jump back to to hard dollars in our PowerPoint here, and let's take a look at a couple of questions that have come up. The first question is, what are the costs of a project intelligence or a business intelligence tool? And the answer is that I wish I could give an easier answer, but there's a wide range, and it's going to depend on a couple of things. It's going to depend on how many projects you have, how many portfolios you have, the size of those projects, because again, it comes a lot down to storage, because we are literally paying for, or whatever solution, project intelligence solution is paying by how many gigabytes of storage it requires. So I guess the short answer is that ranges. I mean, there's Microsoft and SAP and just all kinds of systems out there that have business intelligence or project intelligence offerings, and it can range anywhere from the tens of thousands to some of those tools out there go into the millions. I will tell you, LASSO Project Intelligence falls the whole goal of LASSO Project Intelligence was to make it very easy to access and use and get the reporting info that you need out of it at as low of a cost as possible. So you're not talking necessarily the millions by any means, by any stretch of the imagination for LASSO PI. Another question, how would LASSO connect to my projects? Well, that's going to depend on what kind of system you're using. Currently, our LASSO Project Intelligence is in its first release, and it has what's called a LASSO connector that actually will look out and find a hard dollar database. So it has the ability to connect to hard dollar at this point. And what that means is it finds the database, it sees all of your projects that are stored in there, and it actually uploads all that information automatically into the LASSO interface. The goal, and in the coming year and years, that is going to broaden out dramatically, and we're going to be able to have connectors to the other various systems that you have. Any other questions? If you happen to have any questions, please just throw it in the chat screen and be happy to answer them for you. Give it just a minute here for you to do that. Okay. If something comes to mind as we wrap up here, feel free to type it in. Just a couple other wrap-up items as we finish up here. Some next steps. So from here, as mentioned, this class does go towards CEU credits, and what we will be doing is emailing you a link that will take you to a quiz. That will be sent following this session. We're going to give it about a day or so. And as soon as you complete the quiz, upon completion, and as long as you pass the quiz, certificates will be sent to you via email and within a few business days. So we do have a question that's come up. The question is, could you apply it to one project? So I did kind of focus on looking across all of our projects, but absolutely any report that you can create, you can have it cover just one project if you'd like. You could even have filters set up so that you could look at multiple projects and then filter down to one project. Typically, there's going to be a lot of flexibility in the tool. Thanks for that question. And for all of you that ask questions, we're going to go ahead and just wrap up with some upcoming events that that we talked about. First of all, we're very excited about our Roundup. That is our user conference that we hold once a year. It's coming up February 10th through 12th, so mark your calendar. It's a great time to come down to Scottsdale, Arizona. The weather's perfect, and we're going to have a lot of fun. The next Hard Dollar E101 course is actually coming up next week, followed by our 201 course. That's August 6th through 9th in Scottsdale, Arizona. And we have another one coming up the month following in September 10th and 11th for the E101 and the 12th and 13th for the 201, those courses in Atlanta, Georgia. Our next CEU webinar, we're going to continue our series next month, August 28th at 11 o'clock, same time, Pacific time. That's our Earned Value Management course. And then finally, we have launched our e-learning center. We encourage you to take a few minutes, go to www.harddollar.com. If you go to our services site, you can go to training and you'll see our e-learning center that you can log into and access our e-learning courses, which we have 3 in there currently as of today and many more to come. I have another question that came in. Do you have to have all of the Hard Dollar modules to make this work? A great question. You do not. So it sounds like there's a Hard Dollar user out there. I will say that Lasso Project Intelligence does, well, I was going to say it leans a little bit more towards the project control side, but you know, that's really not so much true anymore. With we've had actually a few releases come out on this first platform, and another one soon to be released that would cover pretty much everything that you would want, all the information that you would want on the planning side as well. So if you're more just with using the estimating modules, you're going to find a lot of value in there for that, being able to compare like your cost to your revenue and get cash flow, and being able to see cash flow over your whole portfolio of projects, for example. Okay, great. Thanks for that question. If anything didn't get answered for you, we don't happen to have the email up on here, but you can always email me direct at paul.bennion, B-E-N-N-I-O-N, at harddollar.com, or feel free to just contact us directly at these lines, at the harddollar.com line, and we'd be happy to take care of you. And that being said, if there's no other questions, we thank all of you.